Marvel movies famously often shoot without a finished script. It's a chaotic-sounding process that still somehow works most of the time. So the fact that these lines of dialogue end up being so important is way more impressive than it looks.
In Avengers Infinity War, Tony Stark confronts Thanos on Titan only to be addressed by name. When he asks if the Mad Titan knows him, Thanos responds,
"I do. You're not the only one cursed with knowledge."
The line is clearly dripping with deeper meaning, but the obvious question is, how does Thanos know Tony Stark? The commentary track for the movie answered that question when screenwriter Christopher Marcus explained, "You realize this interesting parallel between Thanos and Tony. They're both aware of something from an early point, and constantly having to deal with being smarter. Thanos is a futurist as much as Tony Stark. The connection between the two, while it has its limits, certainly explains why the Mad Titan would gravitate towards Stark as a fellow being that struggles with the big issues. But what about the fact that he addressed him by name?" Co-director Joe Russo cleared that one up by explaining that Thanos is, quote, "aware of Stark from the original Battle of New York as the person who undid the plan." This double whammy of Stark initially getting Thanos' attention with a nuke and then connecting with him as a fellow genius certainly goes a long way in explaining why the Mad Titan would have such respect for his opponents. Phase 1 of the MCU was a formative time as many of the basic elements and unofficial laws of how things work were established and fleshed out. One of those unofficial laws has to do with the difference between magic and science, and it's initially laid out by Thor during his first solo outing. At one point in the movie, the God of Thunder and Jane Foster have a conversation in which Thor explains that,
"Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing."
The line, uttered while the two characters are making eyes at one another, is deceptively important under the surface and ends up being a huge mantra going forward. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with Infinity Stones, vibranium from Wakanda, or pretty much anything Doctor Strange does. Most magical moments are eventually explained away in scientific terms at some point or another. Whatever the situation, there's no doubt at this point that the overlap between science and magic has firmly embedded itself as one of the MCU's guiding principles. At one point in Avengers Age of Ultron, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner are seen discussing a new form of artificial intelligence recovered from Von Strucker's Hydra-backed research. The two debate as Stark insists that he wants to harness the potential power of the AI in order to run his Iron Legion as a form of protection for the world. Remember, this all takes place after the group defends Earth from an invasion of Chitauri aliens in Avengers. It also comes after Stark is given a disturbing vision by Scarlet Witch in which he sees death and destruction brought on by another galactic attack. At one point in the conversation, Stark says,
"I see a suit of armor around the world."
The line slips by fairly quickly and is mostly forgotten after Ultron emerges and becomes a threat. But the idea of a global suit of armor as a protection against extraterrestrial threats never quite disappears. In fact, Stark's dream of defending the Earth becomes a primary theme in his gradually unfolding showdown with Thanos as the Iron Avenger attempts to do everything in his power to stop the Mad Titan. The relationship between Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton is legendary at this point, but it's never on better display than it was during the airport fight scene in Captain America Civil War. As all the heroes split off and fight each other, who should find themselves face to face but the pair of ex-SHIELD agents? They engage in a pleasantly entertaining, comparatively low-energy duel that's interrupted when Scarlet Witch tosses Black Widow aside and calls out Barton for, quote, pulling his punches. Initially, Barton gains the upper hand and pins his opponent to the ground, at which point this exchange goes down.
We're still friends, right?
Depends on how hard you hit me.
The scene is a lighthearted break from the serious events of the film and showcases the enduring friendship of the duo. However, it isn't until Avengers Endgame that the gravity of those lines really hits home. When Romanoff and Barton head to Vormir, it turns out that their love for each other is exactly what is needed in order for Black Widow to give her life in order to gain the Soul Stone, an event that also involves some hard hitting as they fight over who will make the sacrifice. One of the best sequences in the entire MCU takes place during Thor's time on Sakaar in Thor Ragnarok. Each scene is filled with tongue-in-cheek slapstick humor as Thor, aka Sparkles, finds himself trapped by the Grand Master and forced to fight his champion. Fortunately, that champion ends up being none other than Thor's old friend and co-avenger Hulk. Thor's reaction when he sees the Jade Giant enter the arena is priceless. His look of concern melts away as he cheers, adding, "Hey! Hey! We know each other. He's a friend from work." It's already one of the funniest lines in the entire movie, which is saying something, but the background behind how it came into being makes it even better. It turns out the line wasn't invented by the writers, director, or even Thor star Chris Hemsworth. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Hemsworth explained that what is arguably the most iconic line from the entire movie was actually thought up by a child from the Make-A-Wish Foundation who was on the set when they filmed the scene. Priceless. When Thanos plucks the Mind Stone out of Vision's head in the waning moments of Infinity War, his victory seems both imminent and inevitable. That is, until Thor suddenly arrives, hurling Stormbreaker at the unsuspecting villain and catching him off guard. The weapon strikes him in the chest, and Thor drops down in its wake in order to gloat in his apparent victory. But of course, we all know what happens next.
You should have gone for the head.
While the repercussions of that line are pretty obvious, there's one hidden side effect that isn't quite so easy to spot. Obviously, Thor's choice to prioritize his own gloating over simply killing Thanos on sight meant half of the universe perished, and all of the pain and loss of Avengers Endgame had to follow. But another unexpected result came in the form of Thor's physical appearance and dejected condition in the fourth Avengers film. In the beginning of the movie, Thor ends up going for the head, decapitating a helpless Thanos in a fit of angry vengeance. But as writers Marcus and McFeely pointed out, that very action turns out to be a failure that breaks his will completely.
Are you crying?
No. Yes.
4 simple words. At this point, we've got pretty used to hearing them, but when one stops to think about their impact on Tony Stark's storyline, not to mention the MCU as a whole, it's a bit staggering. Right from the get-go, Tony Stark was drawn toward the phrase, uttering it during his first solo outing to the amazement of a room full of reporters. The line shows up again in Iron Man 3, this time expanded.
You can take away my house, all my tricks and toys. One thing you can't take away, I am Iron Man.
The words are a rallying point for Stark's identity. They're a way to sum up his entire persona. It's also a concept that comes to its ultimate fruition at the very end of the Infinity Saga. After all the dramatic events in the war with Thanos, as he kneels with the Infinity Stones in hand and his fingers ready to snap away the Mad Titan's entire existence, what 4 words does Stark choose to use? You've heard them before.
Iron Man.
In the early moments of Captain America: The First Avenger, the Red Skull is shown leading a raid on a Norwegian village in search of the Tesseract. The cube, secretly containing an Infinity Stone, ultimately ends up going on to play a key role in Captain Marvel's origin story before it's used by both Thanos and the Avengers during the events of Infinity War and Endgame. But it doesn't take those world-shaking events for the Nazi villain to understand what he has in his possession. As he stands looking at the stone in amazement, Red Skull simply utters,
And the Führer digs for trinkets in the desert.
The line could very well be a reference not only to Hitler's fascination with the occult, but it could also be an homage to the Indiana Jones movies, which feature Nazis searching for both the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail in the desert. Do Indy's adventures secretly take place within the MCU? Well, no. Duh. But either way, referring to an artifact that can obliterate your enemies as a trinket is a pretty bold way to let savvy audience members who picked up on the line know that they're dealing with some pretty powerful stuff.
If you saw Avengers Endgame in a packed theater, then the moment Thor's hammer Mjolnir flies into Captain America's hand probably inspired one of the loudest and most enthusiastic responses from the audience. If not, then it's at least met with enthusiasm from Thor himself, who yells, "I knew it," as he spots Cap threatening Thanos with the legendary weapon.
I knew it.
So what did Thor mean by "I knew it"? In an early scene in 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron, Thor gives the rest of the team permission to try to lift Mjolnir. Thor sits back, confident none of his mere mortal teammates will prove worthy to wield the hammer, until Steve Rogers gives it a shot. That brief nudge and past comic book stories in which Cap has proven worthy of Mjolnir left some fans theorizing that Cap could have lifted the hammer but chose not to in order to spare his teammate any humiliation. Apparently, the Odin son was one of those fans. When Thor yells, "I knew it," he betrays that he thought Cap was faking way back in 2015 as well. And how couldn't he? Cap's as worthy as they come. Speaking of Thor and what he may or may not be worthy to wield, the Thunder God initially thinks he's the only one capable of using the new Infinity Gauntlet to bring back everyone Thanos purged in Avengers Infinity War. The team argues about it, and eventually it's the Hulk who convinces everyone he's the only guy for the job. As he does, it's made clear he's thinking about a conversation he had 7 years before with Tony Stark. In Avengers, as Stark and Bruce Banner look for a way to track the Tesseract, Downey brings up Banner's other guy and compares it to the arc reactor, which at the time was still the only thing stopping shrapnel in Stark's chest from killing him. Banner understands Stark's suggestion that the Hulk saved Banner's life in the gamma ray explosion, but isn't totally on board with the idea.
It's a nice sentiment. Saved it for what?
I guess we'll find out.
In Avengers Endgame, he finally finds out what he was saved for, explaining that he's the only one who can wield the stones and that their radiation is mostly gamma, the same as the radiation that turned him into the Hulk. Banner says,
I was made for this.
When Hulk goes back in time to 2012's Battle of New York, his assignment is to retrieve the Eye of Agamotto, aka the Time Stone. Instead of Doctor Strange, the Hulk finds the Ancient One waiting for him at the Sanctum Sanctorum. Banner and the Ancient One argue over whether or not it makes sense for her to risk her own timeline by handing over the stone. It's when the Ancient One learns that Strange gave the Time Stone to Thanos that she changes her mind. She tells Banner, quote, Strange is meant to be the best of us, as she gives him the Time Stone, meaning that she realizes her future student wouldn't surrender the stone unless there was a good reason. Considering what happens in 2016's Doctor Strange, the Ancient One's reaction is interesting. 4 years from when she calls him the best of us, she'll have Strange physically thrown out of Carmitage.
Teach me.
You could call this a contradiction, but it could also suggest a lot more complexity to the early Sorcerer Supreme and her decisions. Did she expect Strange to eventually show up and wrestle with a decision or whether or not to let him in? Or perhaps, sensing Mordo's potential for turning on his allies, did she kick Strange out just to see what Mordo's reaction would be? Shortly after Tony Stark figures out time travel, he settles down on a couch with Pepper and talks about what he should do next. He tells her that part of him wants to scrap all his work, box it up, and drop it to the bottom of the lake. This is the same Pepper who almost left Tony's employ in 2008's Iron Man over his armored adventures and who was ready to break up with him over his constant tinkering in 2013's Iron Man 3.
This is a new level of lame.
She clearly developed a sense of resigned acceptance since we last saw her, because her words seemed to be what convinced Tony to take his new innovation to the Avengers. After listening to her husband, Pepper tells him that trying to stop him has been one of the few great failures in her life. It's accurate, as anyone who has seen all the Iron Man entries can testify. But there's a bittersweet irony you don't see until the end of the movie's climactic battle. After Tony uses the Infinity Stones to wipe out Thanos and his forces, he collapses and struggles to hold on to what little life he has left. Pepper wills herself to smile at her dying husband and tells him, quote, you can rest now, and so he does. Finally, and tragically, Pepper gets Tony to stop. When Captain America proves himself worthy of Mjolnir, it isn't the only time in the final battle that the old soldier has fans clapping and cheering. After the heroes Thanos purged in Avengers Infinity War finally appear, along with the forces of Wakanda, Carmitage, and New Asgard, Cap takes his place at the head of this army of resurrected friends. He leads the charge against Thanos' dark forces, with the line comic book fans have read so often, Avengers Assemble. You may not even realize it until that moment, but we've been waiting for over 10 years to hear Cap say it. He may have led the team in 2012's Avengers, but he never said the line. He even teased us with it at the close of Avengers Age of Ultron.
Avengers!
When Cap finally says the line in Endgame, if you hadn't realized it before, it suddenly occurs to you that the MCU architects waited a long time for that line. And man, was it worth the wait. After Thanos unleashes his assault on the Avengers compound, Hawkeye is the first to get his hands on the new Infinity Gauntlet. He holds on to the thing for a while, fighting off a swarm of Outriders and surviving an attempt to steal it by the 2014 version of Nebula. But once the purged heroes return and things get real, Hawkeye calls for help. The first hero to respond is Black Panther, who calls out, "Clint, give it to me." It's not a particularly memorable line until you remember how these characters met and the fact that they only exchanged 2 lines of dialogue before Endgame. In particular, their entire conversation was about Hawkeye's real name and how little it mattered. So it's kind of funny that's the name Black Panther uses in Endgame. In 2016's Captain America Civil War, during the airport battle and shortly after Ant-Man shocks the other heroes by turning giant instead of tiny, T'Challa advances on Hawkeye. The conversation that follows is short and to the point.
We haven't met yet. I'm Clint.
I don't care.
Apparently, he started caring just a little bit more by the time Endgame rolled around. One of the best action sequences in 2014's Captain America the Winter Soldier is a tense and eventually violent elevator scene, as S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives who are actually Hydra agents slowly fill an elevator Steve Rogers is taking, and the old soldier soon realizes it's walked into a death trap. Avengers Endgame gives fans a scene acting as both sequel and prequel, as it takes place moments after Loki's capture in 2012's Avengers. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are transporting Loki's scepter when the Captain America from the future intercepts them in the elevator. He's able to convince them to hand over the scepter when he whispers, "Hail Hydra." The line references the Marvel Comics storyline that introduced a version of Captain America who was secretly serving Hydra. This was extremely controversial, and Captain America, Steve Rogers writer Nick Spencer, received death threats over it. Hydra Cap is eventually defeated at the end of the 2017 line-wide event Secret Empire. Endgame also echoes that series when, shortly after getting the scepter, Captain America 2019 is forced to fight as double from 2012, just as the real Steve Rogers defeated his Hydra counterpart in Secret Empire. There are a lot of sad moments in Avengers Endgame's resolution, but one of the funniest involves Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Boarding the Benatar with a heavy sack, Thor treats the spacefaring crew as old friends. He slaps Star-Lord on the back and says, "As Guardians of the Galaxy, back together again." Thor's reference to As Guardians of the Galaxy is more than silly wordplay. In 2018, Marvel premiered the comic As Guardians of the Galaxy, featuring Asgardian characters on a space quest. The most recognizable characters to MCU fans would be Scourge the Executioner, played by Karl Urban in Thor Ragnarok, and a younger version of Loki, who begins the series hidden in the Destroyer's armor. There's also Valkyrie, Throg the Frog of Thunder, and the Thor-like Earth hero Thunderstrike. Considering that As Guardians of the Galaxy premiered in the second half of 2018, Thor's line actually brings up a chicken and egg question of exactly who is referencing whom. Depending on exactly when the scene was filmed, is Thor referencing the comic in that scene, or was the As Guardians of the Galaxy comic inspired by that line from the script? Shortly after we see Cap leading his support group, he visits Black Widow at the Avengers compound. He talks with his old friend about moving on from the Purge, telling her,
I keep telling everybody they should move on. Some do, but not us.
Cap's talking about accepting the losses he and Nat have suffered, rather than trying to find a way to reverse them, but there's a bittersweet foreshadowing to the line as the movie continues. By the time the credits roll, Captain America and Black Widow are two characters who have definitely moved on. Black Widow sacrifices herself to get the Soul Stone from Vormir, while Steve Rogers uses his quest to return the Infinity Stones to recapture the life he lost when he plunged into the ice in Captain America: The First Avenger. If you weren't already crying, that reveal most likely triggered a few happy tears.
Taste the happy, Michael. Taste it. Tastes kind of like sad.
At the beginning of the movie, Deadpool unearths the skeleton of the Wolverine who died at the end of Logan, and to put it lightly, isn't very kind to the remains. Later, a TVA agent who's horrified to see what Deadpool has done gives his opinion about the whole thing. There are many ways that this agent could express his love of Wolverine. He could say he was a great hero. He could say he saved a lot of people. He could even say that he had great hair. But instead, he says that Wolverine is the only thing worth a to ever come out of Canada. That's a very specific jab at Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds. If you can believe anything Deadpool says, he's Canadian.
A hush falls over the crowd as rookie sensation Wade W. Wilson out of Regina, Saskatchewan lines up the shot.
And Ryan Reynolds definitely began his life story in Vancouver, British Columbia. Wolverine 2 was born in Canada despite the person who plays him, Hugh Jackman, being Australian. In the end, Deadpool does not take the insult lightly, either for himself or his real-life alter ego. When Deadpool and Wolverine find themselves in the void, Deadpool, as the chattier one, feels he has to introduce Wolverine to those they meet and fill in any extra details just for fun. But one of those details hits a little close to home. At one point, Deadpool says,
This is Logan. He's usually shirtless, but he's let himself go since the divorce.
Of course, Wolverine is not and has never been married, but those familiar with Hugh Jackman's love life will know that he recently divorced his wife of 27 years, Deborah Lee Furness. It's a rough little jab considering the divorce only happened in September 2023, but apparently Jackman was okay with including it. Of course, later we learn that he hasn't let himself go one bit when Jackman reveals his torso in all its glory. The comment was just Deadpool's way of being snarky. Wolverine has perfect pecs, as usual. Deadpool gives himself the moniker Marvel Jesus, or MJ if you're nasty, because since Deadpool and Wolverine is the first Deadpool film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he'll be the savior that will help Marvel's fortunes rise from the ashes after some unfortunate box office bombs. However, it's also a reference to the Jacksons, and while many will think it's an allusion to Michael Jackson because of the MJ, this is specifically a callback to Janet Jackson, who said her name is Janet Miss Jackson, if you're nasty, in her 1986 hit song, Nasty. When Deadpool and Wolverine are taken to Cassandra Nova's headquarters in the Void, the Merc with a Mouth needs something to threaten the bad guys with, and he comes up with the perfect dig, at least if you don't like musical theater. He declares, quote, he'll sing the entire second act of Music Man with no warm-up. He's referring to Logan in this quote, and while Logan doesn't look much like a song and dance man, the person who plays him, Hugh Jackman, is. In fact, Hugh Jackman has had a whole career on Broadway, which has included starring as Harold Hill in The Music Man.
River City isn't in any trouble.
Then I'll have to create some.
He spent a year in the Broadway revival from December 2021 to January 2023 and received a Tony nomination for Best Actor for his performance, after already winning one in 2004 for another Broadway show, The Boy from Oz. So while singing without a warm-up might be hard, Hugh Jackman, and therefore Wolverine, could certainly do it. Indeed, he'd probably blow everyone away with his amazing musical stylings, despite Deadpool's bad take. Deadpool and Wolverine are stuck in the Honda Odyssey of an attractive Deadpool alternate when Deadpool says,
That friends don't let friends leave the house looking like they fight crime for the Los Angeles Rams.
It's a thoughtful statement. Wolverine is wearing a blue and yellow suit that looks a lot like what the Los Angeles Rams play in. A few tweaks to the LA Rams uniform and it would be a perfect match. This was especially the case in the years when one of the NFL side's uniforms was all yellow with royal blue accents. But at least one version of the uniform is close enough today that Wolverine's suit will no doubt bring the team to mind. And actually, Wolverine really does look like a glorified football player when he's in full superhero mode. He even crouches toward the ground like football players do in a snap. Try to unsee it, we dare you. This line takes place in the Void when Deadpool and Wolverine have their big brawl in the Honda. At one point when Wolverine gets a bit too close to Wade's, bits, he declares, quote, "I'm telling Blake." This is another fourth wall breaking reference to, of course, Ryan Reynolds' wife, Blake Lively. The man who plays Deadpool has been married to Lively since 2012 and has 4 children with her. Reynolds enjoys referencing his wife and her projects in his work. In Deadpool and Wolverine, in addition to this line, he also proclaims there are 206 bones in the human body, 207 when I'm watching Gossip Girl. This, of course, is a reference to the show Lively is known for, and the fact that Reynolds gets happy when he sees her in it. So threatening Wolverine with tattling to the actress is all part of a day's work for Deadpool. Deadpool and Wolverine meet several heroes in the Void, including Jennifer Garner's Elektra. Garner appeared in Daredevil in 2003 and in her self-titled movie in 2005. Given the way that people remember those movies, spoiler alert, they weren't exactly electrifying. It's not surprising that Elektra ended up in the Void. And there were apparently many more heroes there too, including her version of Daredevil, played by Ben Affleck. That is until Cassandra dispatched him. When Deadpool learns this, he has a rare moment of sincerity, telling Elektra, quote, "Daredevil? I'm sorry." To this, Elektra says, "It's fine."
Why?
While that could be Elektra's stoic way of dealing with grief, it also has a double meaning. In real life, Garner was married to Affleck for 10 years, and they have 3 children together, but they split up in 2015 and finalized their divorce in 2018. So yeah, the whole exchange is a cutesy little dig at her breakup with Ben. Wesley Snipes' Blade is another hero found in the Void. When the group of heroes are traveling to confront Cassandra and her lackeys, Blade comments that there's only been one Blade. While this seems like a passing boast, it's actually a reference to the fact that Marvel has had trouble trying to get a new Blade movie off the ground. While Mahershala Ali has been cast as the half-vampire, Marvel has been working on the movie since 2019. 2 directors have come and gone from the project, and it seems no closer to being filmed. So Blade may be correct. There may only be one Blade, at least in the movies. On TV, it's a different story because despite what Blade says here, there's already been another Blade. In 2006, Sticky Fingers portrayed Blade in the TV show Blade the Series. Though the series only lasted for a single 13-episode season, it was created by David S. Goyer, the man who wrote all 3 of Wesley Snipes' Blade films, so it had some pedigree. Still, after all the turmoil with the new Blade film, they may end up scrapping the whole thing, making Snipes the only Blade on the big screen.
You're not ready to roll with this?
When Deadpool and Wolverine jump through the portal provided by Cassandra from the Void, they come out on the other end in the parking lot of the place where Deadpool used to work, destroying a perfectly nice minivan in the process. It turns out Peter, played by Rob Delaney, just sold said minivan to a family of 4, and while the parents are horrified, their 2 boys are thrilled to see the 2 superheroes. Then Deadpool hits them with this quip about Wolverine, and more specifically Hugh Jackman.
Fox killed him. Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
Wolverine has plenty of staying power in the comics, games, or cartoons. After all, someone can draw Wolverine forever. But Hugh Jackman doesn't boast Wolverine's regenerative healing powers in real life. In other words, he can't keep playing Wolverine in the movies forever. At some point, something has to give, although it doesn't seem to have happened yet. He said he was retiring from playing Wolverine after Logan in 2017, explaining his body can't take much more. But then his friend Ryan Reynolds called, and suddenly he was co-starring in Deadpool and Wolverine. And now that Marvel's got him, who knows when they'll let him go. When Deadpool pulls a bait-and-switch on Wolverine at the climax of the film, instead of treating the moment with the gravity it deserves, he does what he does best, joking.
Because I'm Marvel Jesus. Or Spock. Hard to say.
As noted earlier, Deadpool refers to himself as Marvel Jesus throughout the film, and perhaps that's why he goes into the room where a deadly energy can kill him. After all, it was either going to be Deadpool or Wolverine, and though Wolverine volunteered, Deadpool decided he needed to do it. Not because he wanted to, but because people needed him to. The more interesting piece of the quote is his reference to Spock, the Star Trek character famously played by Leonard Nimoy. Deadpool is referencing the ending of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and he's doing it because Deadpool's doing the exact same thing Spock does in that movie, sacrificing himself to save everyone. In fact, Deadpool even does a Vulcan salute, just like Spock does in The Wrath of Khan, before he perishes to save the Enterprise. Despite Deadpool's pending death, at least he gets to favorably compare himself to an iconic character.
Several lines in Black Widow are callbacks to 2012's The Avengers, the movie that proved that Marvel could successfully convert the feeling of comic books to the big screen. The Avengers is the film that lays the foundation for all future Natasha Romanoff character work, and Black Widow wastes little time picking up those threads. Consider, for instance, Natasha's first encounter with Bruce Banner in The Avengers, when he's tricked into meeting with her by a small, deceptive little girl.
And your actress, buddy? Is she a spy too? They start that young?
I did. This proves true during the opening sequence of Black Widow, which flashes back to Natasha's childhood. She objects to the Red Room taking Yelena into training because she's only 6, but Alexei, her surrogate father, reminds her,
"He's only 6.
You were even younger.
Black Widow takes place after 2016's Captain America Civil War, which sees the heroes who fought alongside Steve Rogers imprisoned by the US government. It also sees Black Widow switch sides mid-film, ultimately coming around to Steve's point of view. So it makes sense that Black Widow shows us the fallout from that decision, with Secretary of State Thaddeus Ross coming to arrest Natasha. He says,
"We got Barton, we got Wilson, and the other guy, the incredible shrinking convict. Rogers is on the run."
The line is just the latest in a running gag where nobody in the Avengers knows who Scott Lang is. When he tries to verbally spar with Tony Stark from his prison cell in Civil War, Stark walks right past him.
Who are you? Come on, man.
When Lang returns from the quantum realm in Avengers Endgame, he comments that no one ever knows who he is.
They're Hulk fans.
Wait,
they don't know Ant-Man.
Oh, he feels
Nobody
bad.
Nobody does.
Even by his fellow Avengers, Scott is typically only referred to by dismissive nicknames rather than his hero moniker, making Ross's dismissal par for the course. While some lines in Black Widow reference events that take place within its fictional universe, others speak to the meta-narrative surrounding the film. For example, one line calls out how long it took following her MCU introduction for Black Widow to get her own solo movie. And by the time it finally happened, she was already dead. To its credit, the script acknowledges this injustice instead of pretending it never happened. When Yelena tells Natasha why the Master of the Red Room, General Dreykov, never came after Natasha despite the fact that he escaped death at her hands, she explains it's because it's unwise to attack an Avenger. She tells Natasha that it's obvious that if Dreykov came after her, one of her fellow heroes would likely come to avenge her. But she refers to the other Avengers as the big ones, prompting Natasha to ask what she means by that. Yelena replies,
"Well, I doubt the god from space has to take an ibuprofen after a fight."
While she could simply be referring to Natasha's diminutive size relative to her peers, this line could be a nod to Black Widow always being treated as secondary to her male companions. Almost immediately after their conversation about the big ones, Natasha and Yelena switch to another meta-conversation, this time regarding Natasha's signature pose.
Why do you always do that thing?
What thing?
The pose! It's a fighting pose. You're a total poser.
Again, the commentary here is about Black Widow's image and the fact that the MCU has mostly been interested in her as a physical object up to this point. And yet, despite that, people really do love the Black Widow character, and the stuff she does on the silver screen is still pretty cool. By the end of the film, Yelena acknowledges this and even tries out the pose, subtly nodding to her own future role as the new Black Widow. After spending some time catching up, the Black Widow sisters' conversation turns to the difference between a killer and a hero. While Natasha insists that she's left behind the former and embraced the latter, Yelena argues that Natasha's popularity doesn't wash the blood off her hands. Yelena gets in a pointed jab when she says,
"I'm not the killer that little girls call their hero."
This is the moral conundrum that Natasha has grappled with since the beginning. Can an assassin be a hero? What does the Black Widow's celebrity status imply when she's adored by young girls around the world, despite the sins of her past? This isn't the first time that Black Widow addresses the central conflict that inhabits both the character of Natasha Romanoff and her place in the cultural landscape. It's an issue the MCU will likely still have to grapple with going forward, since Yelena will be faced with similar questions in a different context. After being separated as children, Yelena tells Natasha that she made up an imaginary life for her former spy family. She tells her that she pretends that her parents still live in Ohio, while her sister moved out west and became a science teacher. However, she says that Natasha only works part-time now following the birth of her son. As for her pretend nephew's father, Yelena says,
"Your husband, he renovates houses?"
While in the MCU this is just a happy fiction, Yelena tells herself for comfort, the lines have some real-life significance. When he's not playing Natasha's best friend Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye in the MCU, actor Jeremy Renner has a lucrative side business renovating and flipping houses. And while Barton is happily married to Laura Barton in the MCU, the line is likely a nod to all the fans who had once hoped to see Clint and Natasha pair off. The duo may be solely platonic on screen, but this exchange seems to indicate that some people behind the scenes at Marvel also not so secretly wish these two would get together. Prior to Black Widow, the most we ever saw of Natasha's inner conflict came during an infamous scene in Avengers: Age of Ultron. In it, she tells Bruce Banner that she was sterilized as part of her Red Room training.
You still think you're the only monster on the team?
At the time, this line caused a storm of controversy from people who thought the script was equating the inability to have children with monstrousness. Black Widow returns to this idea by having Yelena brutally describe the forced sterilization in a moment of dark humor. She also asks Natasha at one point if she ever wished for kids. Deliberately reminding the audience of the Age of Ultron criticism might seem like a misstep, but the Black Widow narrative makes it very clear that Natasha and Yelena are victims of abuse, not monsters. Alexei Shostakov, the Russian agent posing as Black Widow's father that we meet early in the film, was formerly a Russian superhero called the Red Guardian. When we catch up with Alexei in the modern day, he's in prison, using his super strength to beat people at arm wrestling. After Natasha and Yelena break him out, he asks Natasha if Captain America ever mentioned him after they fought in the 1980s, calling Steve Rogers
my great adversary in this theater of geopolitical conflict. Not so much a nemesis, more like a contemporary, you know?
While Red Guardian really did fight Captain America in the comics, Steve Rogers was frozen in ice from 1945 to 2011, making an encounter in the 80s seemingly impossible. However, considering the MCU's wonky time travel mechanics and recent introduction of variants in Loki, it's possible that Alexei really battled a different version of Steve in the 1980s after all. While Natasha and Yelena see Alexei as having committed unforgivable wrongs against them, Alexei takes pride in helping them become two of the world's deadliest assassins. Totally incapable of taking a hint, he embraces Natasha and Yelena, telling them,
"Your ledgers must be dripping, just gushing red."
As any MCU fan worthy of the title will remember, this line is a direct reference to an exchange in The Avengers. When Natasha visits Loki in his cell to help Clint Barton, she says she owes Barton a debt.
I got red in my ledger. I'd like to wipe it out.
Loki responds by revealing that Barton told him all about Natasha's murderous past, including a reference to Dreykov's daughter, which finally pays off in Black Widow. He tells her she has committed too many wrongs to ever account for.
Your ledger is dripping. It's gushing red.
The reference is extremely on the nose, but we can only imagine how jarring it must have been for Natasha to hear it. Another satisfying callback to Natasha's scene with Loki in The Avengers comes later in Black Widow, after she's confronted General Dreykov. In the Avengers scene, Natasha acts intimidated, but it's all a ploy to get the God of Mischief to give away his plan.
Thank you for your cooperation.
When Natasha pretends to be helpless against Dreykov in Black Widow, it's reminiscent of her Avengers introduction, which also saw her feigning helplessness. Although the narrative does an excellent job of convincing viewers that Dreykov has power over Natasha, it turns out that she's actually been in control of the situation the entire time. The reveal is made clear when she thanks Dreykov for his cooperation. If there's any one line in Black Widow that hits you right in the gut, It's the moment when Melina tells Natasha to take care of herself, just before they separate. Natasha responds,
"Don't worry, I got this."
I know.
Sadly, we have no reason to think that Natasha ever saw any members of her adopted family again. It's possible that future MCU installments will reveal that they met up a few times in the couple of years between Black Widow and Infinity War, but we don't know for sure. Seeing her restore her bonds with her old family while knowing her ultimate fate is difficult to watch, given her sacrifice in Endgame. Ultimately, Natasha decided to go against Melina's final piece of motherly wisdom, opting to give her life in order to save the world. Like almost every installment in the MCU, Black Widow is a movie about found family. The reforming of Natasha's dysfunctional secret agent family helps her change her attitude toward the Avengers. She goes from accepting their dissolution at the beginning of the film to resolving to put them back together by the end. In the final scene, she says,
"It's funny, my whole life I didn't think I had any family. Turns out I got two. So, one of them's a bit of a mess right now. Gonna go break a few of them out of prison."
This implies that it was Natasha, not just Steve, who hatched the plan to break the incarcerated Avengers out of prison at the end of Civil War. Later, her sacrifice helps reunite billions of families throughout the universe. Ultimately, Black Widow shows that although Natasha Romanoff may claim to work better alone, she truly does have a soft spot for family.
One of the central themes explored throughout The Falcon and the Winter Soldier revolves around Captain America's shield and what it symbolizes to the rest of the world. To Bucky Barnes, the shield represents family. It is his last remaining link to Steve Rogers and the world he knew in the 1940s before Hydra turned him into the Winter Soldier. To John Walker, the shield represents the high expectations he has to live up to as the new Captain America and a symbol of hope for his country. To Carly Morgenthau, the shield is a symbol of a bygone era and a monument to the people whose stories were erased from history. Like Isaiah Bradley, the black soldier Bucky reveals to Sam as a fellow recipient of the serum. Cap's shield means different things to different people, but only Sam seems to view it for what it really is. On its own, it's just a symbol.
Symbols are nothing without the women and men that give them meaning.
Steve's legacy defines the shield until it falls into John Walker's hands. When the new Captain America uses it to kill one of the Flag Smashers, the image of the bloodied shield represents a rapid fall from grace because of the man who wields it. Sam finally reclaiming the shield indicates redemption for its damaged reputation, as he redefines what it means to be Captain America. To the majority of the world, Sam Wilson is a hero. He is the Falcon, a member of the Avengers who faced Thanos, the Mad Titan, and his army in Infinity War and Endgame. It could be argued that this heroism is part of Sam's nature. He is a rescuer swooping in to save the day. Sam's first scene in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier features him rescuing someone from Winter Soldier villain George Batroc, aka Batroc the Leaper. Sam's sister Sarah comments on her brother's heroic character in the same episode, when he vows to help save their family's boats and erase their financial struggles with the bank.
To the rescue, huh?
When fans first meet Sam in Captain America the Winter Soldier, he explains that, prior to aiding Steve in the fight against Hydra, he worked as a para-rescueman for the United States Air Force. This establishes Falcon as someone who dedicates his life to rescuing other people. Later, during a conversation with his sister in Episode 5, Sam talks about wanting to make a positive difference in the world, regardless of the boundaries and expectations placed on his shoulders by society. This earlier fond moment between the Wilson siblings shows just how much Sarah understands her brother, and why Sam is the perfect person to pick up the mantle of Captain America. Like Steve Rogers before him, Sam is a hero, always ready to fly to the rescue.
Listen, this suit, it comes with expectations, bro. You can't just punch your way out of problems anymore.
If this Episode 2 line from The Mask sounds familiar when he says it to John Walker, there's a good reason for that. It's a callback to a similar call for reason in Captain America Civil War.
Steve, you know what's about to happen. Do you really want to punch your way out of this one?
Indeed, both versions of Captain America could have occasionally done better by talking things through instead of rushing in fists first. Lamar's warning foreshadows John Walker's descent throughout the series, culminating in the moment when he kills one of Carly's allies in public. This is the moment that separates Walker from Steve Rogers and establishes that he isn't worthy of being Captain America. When Bucky falls from the train to his supposed death in Captain America the First Avenger, Steve doesn't beat Zola to death with the shield. He keeps his mind on the mission. Even for an Avenger, personal vengeance isn't always the answer. John Walker's right when it comes to one thing: the super soldier serum isn't all it's cracked up to be. Most people injected with variants of the serum suffered side effects, becoming unstable or even dying.
That serum doesn't exactly have a great track record, no offense.
The serum itself was used by Hydra, who gave it to Bucky and several other Winter Soldier candidates. The other soldiers featured in Civil War are revealed to have been too unstable for Hydra to control, and were frozen in cryostasis until Zemo killed them. With the exception of Steve Rogers and Isaiah Bradley, the serum seems to have had negative effects on almost everyone who's taken it. From the Red Skull to Carly Morgenthau and John Walker, either physically harming them or bringing out their worst qualities.
The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great, bad becomes worse.
Walker's line shows that he understands what a risk the serum poses. This doesn't stop him from taking it, however, highlighting how powerless he feels without the enhanced super strength Steve Rogers had. Walker doesn't seem to fully realize, however, that Steve was more than a strong soldier. He was a good man, and the serum brought out the best in him. Both of them were chosen to be Captain America for different reasons. Walker may be a perfect soldier, but Steve was a good man. Bucky Barnes spent more of his life as a Winter Soldier than he did as himself. Bucky spends over 50 years as a Winter Soldier, programmed to kill with his memory wiped between bouts of cryostasis until he meets Steve again in 2014 during Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Bucky tries to shed the Winter Soldier's identity, but it continues to haunt him. And it isn't until his exile in Wakanda that the programming is finally lifted from his mind. Even then, the Winter Soldier remains a familiar role for him to play. Zemo says as much when Bucky pretends to be his former self in Madripoor, preying on Bucky's insecurities about whether he's changed after all.
Didn't take much for him to fall back into form.
What made Steve the perfect candidate for the Super Soldier Serum? He says it best himself during Captain America: The First Avenger.
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
Steve knows what it means to be the little guy, literally. It's a history that makes him more empathetic and is something other super soldiers in the MCU don't seem to have experienced.
The serum never corrupted Steve.
Touché. But there has never been another Steve Rogers, has there?
When Zemo makes this oddly respectful comment about Steve, at the same time, he's unknowingly referencing the original Captain America's similarities with Sam. Sam is another empathetic character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He leads counseling sessions in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, understands Carly's perspective, and tries to reach out to her, and even helps Bucky find some resolution. There isn't another Steve Rogers to pick up the shield, but there is Sam Wilson, and Steve clearly understood that. John Walker's defeat at the hands of the Dora Milaje proves to be the final straw that pushes him towards the Super Soldier Serum in the series' 4th episode. Throughout The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Walker struggles to live up to the legacy of his predecessor. Many characters, including Sam, Bucky, and Zemo, acknowledge that Steve was a rare man, unaffected by the serum's negative side effects. Steve's shoes are hard to fill, even for a veteran as decorated as Walker. Walker struggles to go toe-to-toe against Carly and the Flag Smashers, but it's his loss to the Dora Milaje that humiliates him and drives him to take action. Simply put, he's totally humiliated to be defeated by them.
They weren't even super soldier.
Even without superpowers, the Dora Milaje defeat John in a fight. Their combat training and proficiency with vibranium weaponry are unparalleled. This loss fuels Walker's decision to take the serum so he can feel less inadequate. But what Walker fails to understand is that Steve was more than just his superpowers. Instead of trying to diminish and overpower the Dora Milaje, Steve would have approached them with more respect and diplomacy. This relates to Lamar's earlier line about Walker trying to punch his way out of situations, a near impossible feat when faced with the warrior women of Wakanda. Although Sam and Bucky struggle to get along initially, their relationship evolves throughout The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as they begin to open up to each other and understand the other's point of view. Despite the banter, there's no doubt that by the time they confront Carly at Mama Donia's funeral, they are partners, just as they were with Steve Rogers. John Walker unknowingly marks an important milestone in this relationship when he goes Bucky with a comment about Sam.
Your partner needs backup in there. Do you really want his blood on your hands?
It's one of many things in this series that forces Bucky, a notoriously closed-off individual, to confront the uncomfortable reality that he actually cares about Sam. Sam can handle himself, but the threat of a super soldier like Carly isn't to be taken lightly. Walker plays on Sam's vulnerability as well as Bucky's guilt, as a former Winter Soldier couldn't live with himself if Sam's death was added to his conscience. If any line in the series proves why Sam Wilson should be Captain America, it's his remark to Zemo following his confrontation with Karli in Episode 4.
Blood isn't always the solution.
Zemo argues that Karli has become too radicalized to reason with. In his eyes, she is a danger to society and needs to be killed. Sam points out the hypocrisy of Zemo's absolutist perspective.
Super soldiers cannot be allowed to exist.
Isn't that how gods talk?
It could be argued that Zemo's intentions aren't necessarily evil, though he possesses a ruthless streak that makes him a dangerous person. Like Thanos, Zemo doesn't shy away from killing in his attempts to serve what he sees as the greater good. The Mad Titan believed that the universe had to lose half of its population to survive, and Zemo makes it clear that he views all super soldiers as a threat to human existence that must be exterminated. Sam understands that punching your way out of things isn't the default resolution to conflict. He reasons with Karli and sympathizes with the Flag Smashers' fight, but makes it clear that he can't get behind their violent methods. Unlike John Walker, who responds to Lamar's death by drawing blood, Sam keeps his calm and considers all the options. Fans are introduced to Isaiah Bradley in the series' second episode, but it isn't until episode 5 that his story is truly told. After taking the shield from John Walker, it seems as though Sam intends to give the shield to Isaiah. But Isaiah has other ideas.
Those stars and stripes don't mean nothing good to me.
Isaiah Bradley and Steve Rogers share more similarities than just a serum. While speaking with Sam, Isaiah reveals why he was sent to prison. Fellow super soldiers were captured by enemy forces, prompting officials to abandon them with the intention of blowing up the facility where they were detained to destroy any evidence. Isaiah refused. Unwilling to let them die, he took action.
Those are my men. My brothers, not evidence.
Isaiah rescued the soldiers but was punished for his heroism, imprisoned for 30 years and subjected to experimental tests. With the help of a nurse, Isaiah faked his death and escaped, and his history was buried. If Isaiah's story sounds familiar, it's because it mirrors Steve Rogers' rescue of Bucky and his troops from a Hydra base in Captain America: The First Avenger. Like Isaiah, Steve disobeyed orders to save the lives of his fellow soldiers. Unlike Isaiah, however, he was promoted for his actions, rather than thrown in prison and erased from history. This highlights the deep-rooted racial injustice Isaiah was subjected to, and how differently he was treated as a black man. In the end, only Sam can decide who he is, and whether he wants to be Captain America. Other characters like Isaiah Bradley and Bucky might influence his decision, but ultimately it's Sam who decides to start training with the shield, preparing to take up the mantle Steve handed him. Unlike John Walker, Sam was chosen personally by Steve due to the merit of his character. Bucky admits to Sam during Truth that neither he or Steve considered what it would mean for a black man to be Captain America, prompting Sam to lay some hard truths of his own.
You gotta stop looking to other people to tell you who you are.
This line is as relevant to Sam's situation as it is to Bucky's. Bucky can't let other people decide his identity for him anymore. He's more than 100 years old at this point. It's time for him to start deciding for himself. Likewise, Sam isn't willing to let history's prejudices determine whether he can be Captain America. When his nephews are playing with the shield, we see the world Sam wants to help create. A world where young black boys can be Captain America if they want to. Isaiah Bradley's story should never be forgotten, but Sam is now a part of making a better future that learns from the mistakes of the past, proving that Steve Rogers made the right decision in passing the shield to him. At the beginning of Episode 6, Batroc the Leaper gets what he's been waiting for since Episode 1, a chance to face Sam one-on-one. Adorned in his new Captain America uniform, Sam runs into Batroc, and the latter expresses his frustration over Sam having cost him a lot of money. Shortly after, he mumbles the line, "The robes don't make the monk." It was a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment, as the subtitles were barely on the screen for a second. The line carries a whole lot of weight, and it's a variation of a popular William Shakespeare line. The cowl does not make the monk. Batroc is essentially shading Sam in this moment, who's just officially become Captain America. While looking at his new getup, the villain is telling him that just because he puts on the uniform, that doesn't make him worthy of carrying the mantle. This is especially interesting given that Batroc has once gone toe-to-toe with Steve Rogers in Captain America: The Winter Soldier on the hostage-filled S.H.I.E.L.D. ship. It looks like Batroc might have had a little more respect for our first Captain America and not so much for our newest one. In Episode 6, Karli distracts Bucky with a phone call in an effort to gather hostages from the GRC without his interference. Bucky, who should have been smarter than this, falls for Karli's trick, but the two end up having a pretty poignant conversation despite Karli not really listening to her foe. Bucky gives Carly a stern talking to, telling her that though she thinks her cause might justify her actions, in the end the nightmares won't go away. We know this to be true as Bucky suffered from nightmares in episode 1, ones that he lied about to his therapist. But the line to her that follows turns out to be one of the most personal admissions Bucky could have made, whether Carly realized it or not.
You're gonna remember all the ones you killed.
While this might seem like a piece of advice shared with Carly in an effort to get her to stand down, it's actually a major callback to Captain America: Civil War. In the final battle between Iron Man, Captain America, and Bucky, we hear a powerful variation of the line when the vengeance-fueled Tony has Bucky in a headlock.
Do you even remember them? I remember all of them.
Bucky clearly understands the dangerous path that Carly is on and its serious repercussions. But unfortunately, she doesn't listen, and she meets her end at the hands of Sharon while battling Sam. When Carly and Sam are fighting one another, the latter takes a pretty decent beating from the enhanced super soldier. Even though Sam has new tech and the shield, Carly still seems to have the upper hand against him, and she swiftly knocks him to the ground more than once. However, Carly doesn't want to hurt Sam and gives him an opportunity to walk away.
Stay down!
No.
You might have picked up on it, and kudos if you did, because this was another major callback to Captain America: Civil War. Once Bucky gets knocked down, Steve and Tony go one-on-one in a heartbreaking battle. Tony gets the upper hand after Friday analyzes Cap's fight pattern, and he knocks Steve down to the ground.
Stay down. Final warning.
After rising, Steve responds with his classic retort.
I could do this all day.
This itself was obviously a throwback to Captain America: The First Avenger, when a tiny Steve spoke the line to a bully in an alley. Who knew all these years later would be referencing the famous moment yet again, but in a way that's unique to Sam. Writer Malcolm Spellman could have easily had Sam say, "I can do this all day," back to Carly. We all know the MCU isn't shy about dropping that quote, but by giving him a different line, it gave him a separate identity from Steve, something crucial to his character's story. Because as the Falcon and the Winter Soldier has shown us in its 6 episodes, we don't need another Steve Rogers as Captain America, we need a Sam Wilson.
I don't have the Time Stone anymore.
This is a key sentence, but one quickly tossed off by Doctor Strange as an explanation for why he and Peter can't simply jump through time a la Endgame, fixing reality to suit their needs. The Green Time Stone, obviously, is one of the 6 Infinity Stones. It was contained in the Eye of Agamotto for many of Strange's early adventures, empowering him in moments like his now legendary negotiations with Dormammu. Say it with us.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
Doctor Strange handed over the stone in exchange for Iron Man's life, and Thanos would later use the Time Stone to bring Vision back to life, just long enough to get his Mind Stone. It was later destroyed, but the Avengers time heist had Hulk convincing the Ancient One to give up the stone in 2012. After the world was saved, the Time Stone was returned by Captain America. For all intents and purposes, our Doctor Strange does not have the Time Stone.
I was in the Avengers.
The Avengers?
Yeah.
That's great!
Thank you.
What is that?
Asked by Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, the question is one of many that shines a light on what does and does not exist in the alternate universes these Spider-Men come from. Such questions also work on a second level, as perhaps a bit of jealousy that Tom Holland came of age when the entirety of the Marvel toy box was available to play with, not the restrictive, stick-to-your-own-studio mindset when Maguire and Andrew Garfield were headlining the franchise. In No Way Home, Holland's Peter Parker cites his Avengers inclusion as proof that he's a team player. This is interesting because, in most ways, the other 2 Spider-Men seem to be better experienced and more capable. But sure enough, when Holland's Parker draws up a plan, the other 2 fall in line behind him, perhaps sensing a more authoritative, battle-worn presence.
Just leave me out of this. Fine.
This is an interesting sentence because of our memory of the Infinity War trailers, when they made it look as if Hulk was going to be fighting in Wakanda. Of course, they then pulled a switcheroo with Banner in the Hulkbuster. The No Way Home trailers avoid this phrase in an effort to make it seem as if Doctor Strange's librarian/assistant/confidant, Wong, is opposed to the whole make the world forget who Spider-Man is spell, which in actuality, he's just turning a blind eye to it. Huge difference. Essentially walking away from the problem, Wong leaves Strange and Peter to deal with it themselves. From there, things don't go so well, showing that Wong did indeed know best. Although, to be fair, he really should have protested as emphatically as the trailers made it look like he would.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are these your Legos?
During a tense moment in the film when Peter has taken all the villains back to Happy Hogan's spiritual oasis to devise a plan, Electro asks this question of Tom Holland's Peter Parker. But although he seeks to belittle our hero, what Electro doesn't realize is that those Legos symbolize a lot more than mere playtime. In Spider-Man Homecoming, that Death Star Lego set is what brings Peter and Ned together for endless hours of teen bonding.
Join me and together we'll build my new Lego Death Star.
Ned uses the Emperor to approach Peter in one scene, and later when Ned sees Peter spider-walking across the ceiling, he drops the Death Star.
What was that?
No Way Home turns the Death Star into a callback to those original moments of friendly bonding, as the set is destroyed once again and lays in rubble for most of the film. But as a sweet reminder of their friendship, at the end of the movie when Ned's memory of Peter's been wiped, along with everyone else on the planet, one of the first items Peter places in his crummy new apartment is that Lego minifigure of the Emperor.
At one point, John says, "I speak ABC" to Katie, which many viewers might take as just a cute way of saying I speak English. In actuality, ABC is an abbreviation for American-born Chinese. Writer-director Destin Daniel Cretton said just before the film's release at a press event attended by Looper, "Our conversation behind which languages should be spoken was always rooted in the logic of the characters. That conversation started in the writer's room, and then once our actors came in, it was always a dialogue with them. Is this character bilingual, trilingual, quadrilingual? Characters could speak whatever made sense at the time." As for the ABC line, Simu Liu, who plays Shang-Chi, said the exchange feels very real, explaining, "ABC, of course, means American-born Chinese. It's the first time that you see in a movie someone just calling that out, but it's a lived experience." Early in the movie, at an unguarded moment when the characters are just living their everyday lives, we hear,
"We're now living in a world where at any moment half the population can just disappear."
This line not only alludes to the wider MCU universe, with plot lines revolving around Thanos and his infamous snap, but also to the mindset of ordinary humans still grappling years later with the ramifications. Although Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings doesn't add any new names to known victims of the snap, the event touched everyone, and it does make clear that it's still hanging over the heads of every person on the planet. The general unease of the populace is backed up by a support group poster that can be glimpsed next to the door that Sean enters when he's visiting Katie's family. It reads, "Post-blip anxiety? You are not alone." The seemingly straightforward line, "Give me the pendant and no one gets hurt," represents the final moment of Sean's innocence. For more than a decade, he has been working to build himself a new life in San Francisco, one far away from his Chinese upbringing. But as we're about to see, he hasn't been neglecting his physical fitness. When the robber makes that statement, Sean could have just handed over the jade pendant, shrugged his shoulders, and Katie would likely think no less of him. But that wouldn't make much of a movie, would it?
Does he look like he can fight? Come on, bro!
In a heartbeat, Sean launches from mild-mannered bus patron to full-on Shang-Chi, pulling out acrobatic, environment-embracing, ass-kicking moves that would make Jackie Chan sit up and applaud. In a matter of moments, he doesn't just shatter half the windows on the bus, but also his remaining anonymity and any pretense of normalcy with friend Katie, who watches the whole thing with her jaw open before finally regaining enough sense to hop behind the wheel and drive the bus. By the time the scene is over, everything has changed. Sean has revealed himself to Katie as Shang-Chi, his old life has dragged him back in, and he must go to China to confront his past. Also, the city of San Francisco has a really big mess to clean up. Movies have employed training sequences for decades, but it's another thing to show and explain in raw detail how day after day, month after month, year after year, you were raised to be a killing machine. At one point, Shang-Chi says,
"From sunup to sundown, I was taught every possible way to kill a man."
Some movies have the hero adept in martial arts from the get-go, as if it's just something they picked up. Others allude to the training but don't truly depict the full dedication it requires. But by the time you're finished hearing the tale of Shang-Chi's upbringing under the tutelage of his father and the mysterious death dealer, you fully realize how he was able to mow down those baddies on the bus. Keep in mind, for almost the entirety of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Shang-Chi does not have even one ring. In essence, he's an unpowered would-be hero relying solely on his training to battle a wide array of threats who have everything from superpowers to, at the bare minimum, a machete hand. So yes, Shang-Chi is a trained killer and Simu Liu is talented enough to sell you on all those years of training. Of course, by the end of the movie, Shang-Chi does come into possession of the Ten Rings, so just imagine how powerful he'll be the next time we see him in action. When Wenwu says America was terrified of an orange, some viewers in the audience may have no clue what the wearer of the 10 rings is talking about, but here's what he's referring to. Audiences buying tickets to Iron Man 3 in 2013 thought they were going to see Tony Stark square off against arguably his arch-enemy in the comics, the Mandarin, like the orange. Instead, they got Guy Pearce's Aldrich Killian as the man behind the man, and Ben Kingsley as Trevor Slattery, a British actor pretending to be the Mandarin. At the time, some loved the bait and switch, others were disappointed or even flat out angry. As the years went by, a third narrative became the loudest. By teasing a Chinese character and instead giving audiences a white one, Marvel seemed to be perpetuating a shameful Hollywood tradition of co-opting and whitewashing the Asian experience. Marvel head honcho Kevin Feige became determined to not only address such concerns, but take back the Mandarin. Which is why, in 2014, Marvel released a one-shot called All Hail the King, which depicted a post-Iron Man 3 Trevor Slattery in prison. The short film features a reporter telling Slattery that his portrayal has angered the 10 Rings, the terrorist group associated with the real Mandarin. At the end of the film, the interviewer reveals his true identity as an agent of the Mandarin and takes Slattery prisoner.
There's somebody who wants to meet you.
Do I know him?
No. But you took his name, and now he wants it back.
Which brings us to Shang-Chi, Wenwu's recounting of the story and the later revelation that Slattery has been held prisoner ever since in the real Mandarin's dungeon basement. The advice given to Katie when she joins the battle at Ta Lo, if you aim at nothing, you hit nothing, is more than just Archer mindset. As we see at the beginning of the film, Sean and Katie were leading a largely aimless existence, valet parking cars for low wages, spending nights drinking and singing karaoke. As Katie's family were all too eager to point out, it felt like a roadmap to nowhere. But what she didn't realize is that her drinking buddy did in fact have a purpose, even if he was actively working to suppress it. Through Shang-Chi's embracing of his destiny and her support as a loyal friend, the two characters ended the film with something to finally aim for. A future as superheroes, possibly as Avengers, and perhaps Katie continuing to embrace her skills as an archer and car chase driver.